Imagine a big audience. It's a symposium and probably 3,000 plus people. They're coming in to network. They're coming in to make connections, to make business, to grow business. Imagine you come into this big gathering and you walk in and everything is unknown. You don't know anybody. you don't know a single soul, and you really want to be a part of this great event, but you seem somewhat paralyzed. You seem somewhat of a shy, and you don't even know how to start a conversation. So you're in the midst of the big gathering, yet you do not know whether you belong there. And that's exactly how I felt back in 2016 when we had gatherings back then at the Worldwide ERC Symposium. And I could tell you, it was a very interesting experience. And I had to overcome my fears to start having conversation with strangers, to start exchanging information, exchanging discussions. And, the rest of history, I've built a lot of great, meaningful relationships there. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm very grateful for you and for this platform that connects each one to new opportunities. My name is Jana Masik. I'm the host of this LinkedIn Live broadcast, Powering Unique You. And today, let's say it's all about networking. We're going to talk how to actually enjoy networking. And I have a very special guest for you. And before we dive into that and I introduce the guest, I would like to say hello. Tell me where you're from. Tell me how you're feeling today on this Monday. Lovely morning in Florida. It's a little bit cloudy, a little bit windy. Tell me how the weather is treating you where you are. I have Rosalie joining in. Hello, my dear friend. I'm so excited to have you here. I have Keith saying hi, Jana from Columbus, Indiana. I'm not sure if you're cold out there, Keith. I'm happy you're joining in today. So today's guest is very, very interesting character. This gentleman I met here on LinkedIn through a common introduction. So we got connected, we had a conversation, and he has a good, I say, inspiring background. He's actually an accredited actor at IMDB. He's also occasional backup for Josh Groban. He's a 2-time Chicago marathoner. I admire that. I need to take a run. We need to do all the exercises, right? He's also built HR community. So he has a great background in HR. He had many years working in the corporate world of HR. And then he moved on into building the HR community and helps individuals and organizations leverage DISC personality assessment. I could say this gentleman is a DISC guru, and I am so excited to welcome Erich Kurschat. Hello, Erich.
Good morning, Jana. Thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you here today, this Monday morning. We have people joining in. Sandra saying hello. Jana and Erich logging from Alexandra. We have Robert saying hello from New York City. We have Bilal saying hello from Dhaka. Hello, Bilal. You're joining us from Bangladesh. So good to see you. Well, we have a whole international house full of house today, Erich.
We'll take it. Everyone's welcome to this conversation.
We'll take it. And it's all about networking. Hush, what a topic. Now, tell me, what is the reason you are passionate about networking?
Well, I got to say right off the bat, when you said a 3,000 person networking event, I cringed for a couple reasons. Number one, any event with 3,000 people in the same space these days is just not going to happen. I'm glad this was in the past, and then two, a 3,000 person networking event just makes me nervous, period.
Yes, my hands sweat already. I can remember about that. And it was uncomfortable. But let's admit, even sometimes 50 people in the room, sometimes it's a Zoom right now, right? It's right now in this virtual environment that we have an opportunity to join on the Zoom. And if we don't know majority of the people, it is very uncomfortable to, present yourself, to put yourself out there, and to actually make a benefit out of meeting new people.
I really think that it was wonderful that you chose this topic. I think it's one of those topics that's always valuable and always worthwhile to talk about. But I think especially now with not being able to hang out in the same room with people and jumping on Zoom and craving connection, but at the same time feeling like you hit your limit very quickly when it comes to Zoom and the video conferencing you're doing. But then also knowing that networking is so important for our careers and who we are professionally and sometimes even personally. So there's just a lot mixed up in this conversation right now.
I love this. And Erich, please share with me, have you personally struggled with networking, and what were the challenges that you faced?
I have, I would be lying if I said I've never struggled. I certainly have in a couple of different ways. Number one, I fell into that group of people who thought, when I was employed in a more traditional sense as an HR practitioner for 16 years, a corporate HR professional, I thought, I have a job that I love. I work for a company that I love, and I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. I didn't have a LinkedIn profile. I didn't do any networking. Maybe some internal networking, I suppose. So we could talk about that, the difference there. But externally, I really didn't do too much because I didn't see a need for it.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I was avoiding it for those reasons. But honestly, and this is something that I get more passionate about, I think I was avoiding networking because it just was uncomfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the idea of stepping into a room of 3 or 3,000 people that I didn't know. And, there's potential that I would have to make small talk, and then I might fumble over my words, and that I might leave and, people might question, who is that guy and what does he do? What value does he bring? And why should I care? I just didn't really want to have anything to do with any of that. And I think I actively avoided it. So that's the long-winded way of saying networking has never been comfortable for me.
Yes. Well, as you are listening in today, please share with us if you're comfortable, uncomfortable, if you're working on improving your networking skills. How are you doing with networking? We have Dion joining from Texas. Hello, hello. So good to see you. We have Crystal saying hello from Memphis. Hello. So good to see you all. Thank you for joining in this morning. I say it is uncomfortable, Erich. I agree with you. For majority of the people, give us thumbs ups on LinkedIn if you think so, and that's the main reason why we chose this topic today, and how we can maybe brainstorm together and share our mutual experiences. Because you mentioned something important. There are 2 types of networking: internal and external. And I think all of us are more comfortable, especially when we're working for the organization. And like you said, we feel comfortable, we love the company, we love what we do. It's somewhat easier to network internally because you have common company, you have common goals as a company together, you get to know people in our workspaces. But when you step outside of that comfort zone, that's where the whole fun starts, right?
We can call it fun.
Yes, and a lot of people say it's unenjoyable, and maybe it's unfruitful, like you described when you are working in your job and everything is good. You don't even need to have a need, right? You don't seem that it is necessary. So why would you think people do need to rethink that, and especially right now during these turbulent times that we're in?
Yeah, so your point is a fantastic one, and I spend a lot of time talking about introversion, and that's something that we can get into during this conversation as well. But honestly, what I've learned, Jana, is that networking is uncomfortable regardless of, or can be uncomfortable regardless of your personality style. So I would say that introverts experience some unique obstacles or perceived obstacles, but extroverts do as well. So it's, my goal is never to say, okay, well, it's only hard for one group of people. I think it can be difficult or challenging across the board when it comes to personality styles. But I really do believe, and this is coming from somebody who identifies as being introverted himself, I really do believe networking can be both fruitful and enjoyable. And you've mentioned those words already, and I think that they're both so important. I think it needs to be enjoyable first and foremost. I don't know that I want to spend too much time myself doing anything, personally or professionally, that isn't enjoyable in some sense. And of course, there are exceptions to that.
Yes.
But networking has a bad rap, and I think part of it is because we use the word networking. Maybe there's another word that we should consider. At its core, it's really just building relationships. It's building connections and friendships. And I think when you put it in that light, it becomes a little bit more palatable. The second piece is it has to be enjoyable, but I think it has to be fruitful. And I would say there's a misconception around what fruitful means. Enjoyable, I think we can define for ourselves,
Yes.
Fruitful needs to be defined for ourselves as well, but I think it can be defined more broadly than we currently do. I think we step into a networking situation, whether it's a room of 3,000 people or a Zoom conference, and we come in with a perspective that we need something. I need a job. I need an introduction. And if I don't leave this event without having gotten those things, it hasn't been fruitful, right? I spent an hour on Zoom, I talked to all these people, but I didn't get a single job connection. So it must not have been fruitful. I would love to be able to change our perspective on what it means for a networking opportunity to be fruitful.
Yes, you're touching on a very deep points. Number one, what I love that you've pivoted from networking, which to me is very dry as well. It's almost like that network of verb connections, the wires, right? It's so much more than just to have the dry wire connection. It is relationship. It is deeper, meaningful, I almost say ties that you build with people. And there are different levels of it, right? Some of them may be a little bit less tie or a little bit less, not as deep. But some of them can begin from a conversation, but tie into a very deep end. And some people say they fall in love from the first time, right? From the you just never know. Sometimes things happen from a simple conversation. And then the second thing that you've touched is defining fruitful, or this ROI, right? On the connection, or ROI in relationship. And those things are not very easy to measure. And sometimes when you focus on building value and adding value to people, and you focus on finding ways to help people, you don't necessarily see the return right away. And we chatted about it right before we went live. You don't necessarily see a hard return on your investment, so to speak, of spending the time to connecting and building relationship with someone. Yet I do see that in the longer term, there are going to be more opportunity where people sense that you're genuine, people sense that you're interested, and they say, well, if I cannot help you right now, if I don't have an opportunity for you right now, definitely along the line, I'll find a way to either connect you with a person that may help you or find some mutual collaboration opportunities.
I teach, I have a session called Network Like an Introvert. And I'm often recommending people use that hashtag on social media, Network Like an Introvert, just to get a different perspective on what networking can be, and really empower people who identify as being introverted to believe that this is something that they can do well, that they bring natural strengths to networking situations. And in my session, I have a slide that is a photograph of a path through the woods that kind of curves off in the distance, and you don't see where it's going. But you see very clearly in the forefront these trees that make up the sides of this forest path. And the point that I make there is sometimes we're so focused on those trees being what I need now, the introduction, the client, the job, etc., that I lose sight of the fact that the goal of networking is to build a meaningful relationship. And you don't always know where that's going to go. The goal is whatever happens around that corner that you can't see. And just because these things are distracting you to a certain extent, you're unable to see the fact that the goal really is that long-term relationship, and honestly an ROI that you might not be able to quantify off the bat. Now, for somebody like me who doesn't want to spend oftentimes 5 minutes or $5 on something that I can't quantify the ROI on, you tell me, just have a conversation, just agree to a coffee, just carve out an hour of your day for a discussion with somebody. Who knows where it's going to go, but it could be worthwhile. There was a time where I would have pushed back and said, that doesn't sound valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn from scratch the value of having faith that relationships will go wherever they're going to go. And sometimes there's immediate payoff for one or both people. Quite often it's not so immediate, but over time, somebody comes back to you and says, remember that conversation we had a couple of months ago? I was so grateful that you spent 20 minutes with me. That led to this for me. I got a job connection, or I got an introduction, or you said something that really inspired me. And had I not been open and receptive to that discussion at the time, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be of value in a way that couldn't be quantified right off the bat.
Yes, I love this. This is really powerful. And I love that you're showing that intangible results, right? And for people that are so focused on this return on investment, what is my return? What can I get from it? It's tough to see, and I love this allegory that you also gave, to see that pathway can lead to something that may be even beyond our imagination. So sometimes it's investment and focusing on people and focusing on building relationship and providing value to people without seeking something in return can be a part of your service, can be a part of your way of giving, can be a part of, you developing your generosity, especially when you are an expert in a certain area. And we have a lot of professionals here tuning in. You're an expert in a certain area. You have mastered specific skill. And there might be people that are just beginning, that are just starting on that journey, and, maybe giving 15 to 30 minute mentorship of advice or some guidance to someone, it can serve you a long way. So we have a lot of people enjoying the conversation and commenting. Good. We have Marcia saying hello, good to see you. Sandra saying networking gets bad rap and generates a lot of anxiety when it's thought as of are difficult or the same category as cold calling. So if one thinks that what happens naturally with like-minded professionals or surrounding topics we're mutually interested in, it starts feeling more natural rather than forced. And yes, one needs to define why we do it and what is in the win. So yes. Really good comment.
Thank
Sandra.
you for that, Sandra.
Yeah, it's really good. Marcia saying, by networking, we learn from others. We gather different and valuable perspectives. Yes, this is really good. And Robert saying, good point, Eric. Just because someone doesn't walk out of the event with job offer doesn't mean the networking wasn't fruitful. Those relationships built will bring benefits in the long term. So yes, I agree. Robert, I agree with you on that point as well. Keith is saying, when you network with the intention of serving others, it can be both fruitful and productive.
If you don't mind, Jana, I'd like to build on what Keith has said there, because I think that's so insightful. So, one thing that I do often hear from people who are introverted like myself, and I've said this before as well, is I just don't like feeling like I'm in the spotlight. I don't... I show up to an event and I feel like I'm walking around in the spotlight and I have to answer all these questions, and I get uncomfortable. I get, there's anxiety there. One of our attendees mentioned the word anxiety. And one of the things that I often like to say is sometimes those of us who are least comfortable in that spotlight are the slowest to realize that we can control where it's pointing. We show up, and if we remain in the spotlight and everything is about us, and I invite that attention, and I'm talking mostly about myself and letting people know what my needs are, I remain in that spotlight, but I'm also controlling where it's pointed. And I think it's an eye opener for folks to recognize and to realize that they don't and maybe shouldn't have to remain in the spotlight. That if I show up to an event, I want to show up clear on what my value is and what my need is, right? I'm not just going to show up for fun because I have nothing else to do. Odds are, I still want to be clear on what my need is. So I'm not suggesting that you not realize or not be clear on the fact that you do need a job or you need a connection or an introduction. But the extent to which I am able to point the spotlight on you, Jana, during our conversation is going to determine the extent to which you find me to be somebody who's likable, that you want to talk to, that you want to help and support along the way. It doesn't mean I have to go overboard to be flattering and then I have to make stuff up or any of that business. But if I show up with the spotlight on me, insisting to talk about myself the whole time, I don't know that it's going to be fruitful and likely isn't going to be too enjoyable either. But if I show up clear on what I need, but willing first and foremost to shine that spotlight on other people, to serve them, I think it's Zig Ziglar, among other people, who have talked about the universal law of reciprocity.
Yes.
Which says if you help enough other people get what they want, you will get what you want. Yet we're so focused on our needs, those trees in the foreground of that picture that I talked about, that we don't stop to consider that we may be, or this event, whether online or in person, may be more enjoyable and fruitful if we are willing to step out of the spotlight and shine it on other people and ensure that their needs are being met and their headaches and challenges are being solved first and foremost. And it's a change in perception, a shift in perception that I think is just so valuable for people.
It is. I absolutely agree with you on this, Erich. It is very valuable perception. Something that I read this morning, actually, you look at the same thing, but if you change the perception of how you're looking at that thing actually changes for you, right? So that's exact illustration you gave us, is how do you change your perception of coming into, right now we're in a virtual stage, coming into a virtual Zoom meetings or virtual team meetings. You come in with the heart of service to shine light on others, to support others, to help others. And I think that shifts that mentality and anxiety, because you not necessarily have to show, who you are. And this point can actually go, I think, and apply to interviews. Sometimes why people are so anxious about interviews, is so anxious. It's another form of connection, another form of building relationships, right? So when you focus on me, you're going to be anxious. But when you focus to come and have a conversation and to say, let's explore. I have some skills, I have some experience, I have some credentials, but much more important, I want to see what is the company, what's this role is exactly needed for, and can I add value to your company, and can what I know and what I can offer be something that you'd be interested in, and bringing the spotlight on the person you're talking to can be applied even in interview settings. Yeah. I feel this is really powerful point that you've given us, Erich. And to this, I also wanted to say, it's how you position yourself. And when you come to conversation, sometimes it is more valuable to listen than to talk. Sometimes it is more valuable to ask questions about others. And it's another form of shining light, right? Asking questions and being curious about other people, getting to know other people. And didn't you notice when somebody's letting you speak and somebody's asking you a question and very curious about you, you feel good about yourself.
You feel really good.
And you're like, oh, this person is so fantastic. And there's one, I was watching a masterclass about negotiating. And this gentleman, I think it was Chris Voss, that he mentioned this follow-up question. So you just repeat the last sentence of a person. And he said this one person did that at the networking event. He went on, and all he did is he just repeated the last 3 words of a people when they start talking to him with the curiosity. And he was like the most admirable person of the evening. Everybody were like, they come to his wife and they're like, oh, your husband is so phenomenal. He's so amazing. I'm like, this is interesting technique. It must be working.
And it really isn't. I mean, it's something that can be learned. A lot of people will say, well, I'm not sure that I'm naturally inquisitive. That I think that this is a muscle that can be strengthened. And I've seen it among children too. And that's the most astounding to me, is that, I myself and I'm around adults on a regular basis that struggle asking meaningful follow-up questions, listening actively and then asking meaningful follow-up questions. And my wife and I were visiting friends of hers, and these two guys that are friends of hers adopted at the same time 5 children. And about the same time, I think it was in a couple of different settings. But anyway, they ended up with 5 adopted children, and the youngest was Derek. And so we show up, and one of the fathers comes to the door, and he says, oh, hey, Derek, you remember Katie? And this is her, I think I was a fiance or boyfriend at the time, Erich. And he says, you remember Katie, right? And Derek has this big smile on his face, and he nods his head. And then he says, you remember that Katie's a teacher, right? And Derek, smiled, and I knew it was going somewhere, but I wasn't sure what was happening. So I just was playing along. And then the father said, what can we ask Katie? What's a question we can ask Katie? And Derek pauses for a moment and he says, what do you teach? And my jaw almost hit the ground because this 4-year-old was being taught at home how to listen actively and ask meaningful follow-up questions. Derek could have taken the spotlight back to himself and said, well, I'm in school, I have teachers, something about himself. And he kept it on Katie long enough to ask her a meaningful follow-up question. What do you teach? And here my wife is having a meaningful conversation with a 4-year-old child in their foyer. I mean, it was astounding to me. And so I think it reinforced that if children can show up and ask meaningful follow-up questions, if children can be naturally curious and inquisitive, like the daughter of another friend of mine, her name is Scarlett. I showed up, we're talking to Scarlett about the beginning of this past summer with the pandemic and how, school was going to be different. And I expected that we would just continue talking about her and her school, I think around 8 or 9 probably at the time. And, she starts to talk about her summer, and then she pauses in the middle of it and looks to me and says, so how are you? I just, having that question come so intentionally from a child really reminded me that as adults, we can also be inquisitive. We can listen actively, we can ask meaningful follow-up questions, and we can develop those muscles. These are things we can learn to do if we don't feel we are naturally wired that way.
I love the stories and examples that you've given us. It's like a little nudge of encouragement. Come on, if children can do that, anyone can do that, right?
Exactly right.
I love this. And we have more comments here. Robert is saying he's agreeing about adding value and being genuine. From his perspective as well, 2 of the most important keys to successful networking, adding value and being genuine. I agree with you. And we have Laura saying, change the way you look at things and things will change. Exactly how Laura is trying to live it daily. And Laura is doing a lot of great short episodes about New York City. She's fantastic. Eric, Keith is saying, Eric, love the way you've said you get to choose whether to shine a spotlight on yourself or shine it on others. Yes, I agree with you. So yes, great comments. Keep them coming. Let us know if you have questions. This episode is for you, to serve you. We're just here, sharing our experiences, and so excited to hear your thoughts on this important topic. If you find value in this episode, please hit the share button, give us some love, give us some thumbs up, and share what exactly you're finding value at and what is serving you so your community can get the value as well. Now, Eric, we talked about the difficulties, we talked about overcoming them, changing the perspective, and you touched a little bit on personalities. That even extroverts and introverts can find a way to communicate, and maybe give us a little bit, I know with your disc muscle skill set and the toolbox that you have, give us maybe a little bit of practical application or some tactical things that both extroverts and introverts can pick and implement.
I would love to. There's a quote that's often attributed to Shakespeare, not Shakespeare. Hold on, I'm blanking suddenly. It doesn't matter. It's attributed to somebody that people have said hasn't said it, but it's if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, the fish will live its entire life believing that it's stupid. And I love that quote for a number of reasons, but I think it sheds light on what I see as a primary concern for me, is that folks attempt to network in the ways that they see other people doing it and assume that that's the way it should be done. So in the example of introverts and extroverts, I've heard so many, Albert Einstein, I think I said Shakespeare. Albert Einstein is the person to whom that is misattributed. I've heard a lot of introverts come to me and say, Eric, I can't network. Like I don't do it well because I am not extroverted. I'm not comfortable stepping into a room full of a bunch of people and taking center stage and being the life of the party. That's not me. So I must not be able to network. And I've also heard from extroverts who say, you know what? I see introverts showing up and getting into a really deep, meaningful conversation with somebody that clearly turns into something. And I don't know that I'm wired to do that. Like, I don't know that I find enjoyment in that. So I must not be able to network as effectively as those on the introverted side of things. And so what I want to say right off the bat as we get into the applicable piece of this is, right away, we have to do away with the sense that there's a right way to do this and it's somebody else's way. And
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about helping introverts in particular see that this very social thing is something that can be done. There's a misconception around introverts is that we don't want to be social and that we want to avoid connection and we'd rather just turn off the lights and sit in the closet, and not have to deal with other people. And that's not the case. Even Susan Cain herself, the author of the book Quiet, said,
Yes.
introverted or extroverted, we all find enjoyment in connecting with other people. The question is how much connection and what type of it. We need different levels of connection, and we don't have to get into defining necessarily introversion and extroversion in detail, but they can tell even babies in a hospital, in the nursery after they're born, there are ways that you can tell which of those children may end up being over time a little bit more introverted than extroverted. There's physiological underpinnings to this. So all of that, and I'm big on setups like that, but all of that to say that the value, one of the values of networking is that diversity, that cognitive diversity of thought and opinion and communication style and background and experience that is brought into conversations. I need to know about myself first and foremost. When I show up to an event, whether it's in person or online, I need to know, yes, what my value statement is, what value I bring to other people, but I need to know how I'm wired. I need to know what my natural communication style is. DISC is just one potential common language for helping people get that insight, to be introspective, to say, who am I? Before I show up to meet Jana, who am I and what value do I bring to our relationship? Mm-hmm. Then once I step beyond myself, then I have to embrace and understand and appreciate the fact that there is diversity of communication style out there. If I show up very detail oriented, that doesn't mean that you're going to be. Yes. Or if I show up wanting to really, loving small talk and loving talk in general, and just wanting to go on for an hour with you, that doesn't mean that you're going to also want that as well. And the more in tune I am to your needs and your preferences and what you want out of this conversation, the better the odds that I'm going to really be able to build a meaningful connection with you, rather than resorting to what comes most naturally to me and insisting that you speak my language. I want to learn to speak yours so that we leave having had the opportunity to demonstrate that I really do want to bridge that gap, that I want to connect with you in a meaningful way, not in a way necessarily that's going to be meaningful to me, but in a way that's going to be meaningful to you. And I think that's how I begin to make friends. And that's where really strong relationships begin.
Yes, this is powerful. And I really appreciate that you started on giving us this picture, or painting this picture on the inside. Is a lot of times we compare ourselves or we look at others and we say, wow, they're doing it phenomenal, and I by no means can do that, right? And we think that way is the only way to do it. Yet the whole idea and mission behind this broadcast, Powering Unique You, is to realize that you are unique, that you have your own ways that are very special and specific, that only you have the skill set, the abilities, the personality, whether you're on an introvert swing or extrovert swing, it doesn't matter. Embrace your value, that you are worthy, that you are valuable, that you are an amazing person. And to your point, Erich, is knowing your personality, knowing what you're most likely inclined to, your style of communication is so valuable. This self-awareness can give you the sense of almost like give you the sense of, I say, strength, like internal confidence. That's the word I'm looking for. Internal confidence that you know who you are. And a lot of people, they get lost. They're like, I'm here, but I'm not quite sure what I'm about. So the assessments, I love assessments. And I know DISC is very good assessment that if you're interested in getting and learning more about yourself, gaining that self-awareness, reach out to Erich. He'll be happy to give you some details and that, give you some insights on that. So that self-awareness is crucial. Embracing your uniqueness, embracing that you are one of a kind and you are here on this earth to serve to your own mission, your own destiny. And then being open, like I love to say in diversity, all the people are different. We're all different, right? We have different backgrounds, different, fingerprints. and we need to be open to not starting again, not to be light on me, but knowing your strength, being confident in yourself, then being open to hear others, then being open to embrace others, to know that there's a diversity in communication, in the thought process, in values, and people may value different things from what you value, yet you can have a mutual, respectful conversation. I love this allegory. This is really beautiful. And we have more people saying to that. Robert is saying, great point, Erich. Learning tactics and strategies is helpful, but each of us have our own networking blueprint. This is a good, based on individual personality and strength that we will discover through practice. Robert,
I really don't think that there's too much that you can do in life without the confidence of first knowing who you are and how you're wired. And the beginning of this, and I have a couple of very practical tips to share, but I start with this, that it might sound more like a pep talk, but I really think it's important. If you don't first believe in yourself and have a sense of who you are and how you do your best work, how you communicate with other folks, everything else just becomes that much more difficult.
I agree. I agree that sense of self-discovery, being on that path, and also understanding that we all evolve, we all grow, we all develop. Yeah, that's a starting point. And when you see a certain traits and and have the confidence about who you are, embracing you are, and start comparing yourself to others, you are more. I feel like the people get more confident about this, and I love that you serve professionals in such a way to empower people to be confident about who they are. We have more couple comments here. Thank you so much, Jana, for hosting the show, and Erich for adding valuable insights. My viewpoint is social skills are key to networking and maintaining relationship with anyone. That is true. And we have Andrew saying, I've networked in both sales capacity and on the personal level. My best success has come from the personal level and has led me to travel and meet the most amazing people from all around the world. Networking is key to building powerful relationships and success. I agree, Andrew. And Marcia saying, completely agree. We need to know ourselves first. That's a great one. I love this. This is a great point, Erich. We have people agreeing to that. And I do agree that self-awareness is a key. So now, Erich, why don't you give us a little bit of a guideline? We started talking about, my first story was about 3,000 people, 5,000 people event, a lot of people in-person event. When we talk about networking, that's what automatically, historically comes to mind. What are the difference now that we are not able, or maybe not possible for us to attend in-person events? What have you seen can be applied to a virtual ways to build this meaningful relationships?
Thank you for asking. It's funny, we talked about earlier about, walking around a room and taking the spotlight off of yourself and putting it on other people. And now we're sitting in front of our computer and everybody's looking at us. And we are one of all of these blocks, these boxes that you see, and everyone's staring at you. And, it can be uncomfortable. And it's funny, one of my favorite quotes about introversion or memes that I saw was, introverts unite, just separately and in your own homes. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We are uniting, but separately and in our own homes. So I think that there are a lot of people who said, well, this is the time for the introverts to shine. We can hang out by ourselves and we don't have to do as much in-person networking. And even introverts are saying, it's still it's still exhausting, or it can be exhausting. And other people are saying that as well. Extroverts are saying, you know what, I can only spend so much time on Zoom. There are some people who probably would spend even more time, but I think I'm hearing from both sides of the spectrum that it can be a bit much. So my first tip is really to understand your boundaries, understand your limitations, and when your energy is going to run out.
Yeah.
Introverts in particular have to really save up energy for a conversation.
Yes.
We have to know what we're getting into and save up just enough energy to get through it, even if it's something that we love talking about with people that we love, talking with. Throughout that conversation, that event, we are depleting that stored energy that we have. So whether you're introverted or extroverted, I think be realistic about how many events you can attend in a given week and how long you can spend sitting at Zoom. If you're 2 hours into an event where you really only had 30 minutes of energy for it, you're not bringing your best self to that conversation.
Yes.
So I think it's being realistic about the number of events, how much time you're sitting in front of the camera, and, and the people go back and forth about this. I think whether or not your camera needs to be on.
Yes.
I would argue, by and large, depending on the event, that having your camera on is going to reinforce meaningful connection with people, certainly in one-on-one conversations. But I think we've all attended those networking events and Zoom events where it's not crucial that our camera is on. So I know anytime I host an event, for example, I have this lunch date series that I do. I say right off the bat, if I would prefer that you have your camera on so I can connect with you in that way, but if it needs to be off for any reason, I will respect that and appreciate that. So that's tip number 1, is set reasonable goals and boundaries for yourself. 2, take advantage of the chat area. If you're somebody who doesn't love the back and forth, or you get exhausted by the back and forth of live conversation, what can you do in that chat area to keep the spotlight on other folks, to ask questions, to welcome people into the conversation? So much can happen in chat, which takes then your focus off of the fact that people can see you. It's a little bit of a distraction, and a welcome distraction, but still allows you to be of value in the conversation. And then the final thing that I would mention is we have tools at our disposal to facilitate meaningful connection. And LinkedIn is going to be, in my opinion, for many business professionals, at the top of that list. Learn how to use LinkedIn effectively. And that doesn't mean that everybody should open a profile and an account and know right off the bat how to use it effectively. I think it's put out there, and we're given this big button that says connect. And so we hit it and we assume that is the beginning of a meaningful connection. And it just honestly isn't. I'm thinking back to that image that you brought up earlier of the wires, the network of wires.
It's true.
So we may be wired to be connected at that point, but it's not the beginning of a meaningful connection until one or the other of us reaches out with a personalized, customized introduction to say, this is who I am. This is why I'm choosing to connect with you. This is how you may or may not know me already.
Mm-hmm.
I really look forward to wherever this is going to take us. Not, my name is Eric and I need a job, or just silence, which you get quite often, just a connection with no introduction. You should be personalizing every introduction that you make on LinkedIn. And that's the very beginning to using LinkedIn as a really valuable tool for meaningful connection going forward.
Yes, I love these tips. And I love that you started with energy. This is so relevant to powering. You're like hitting all the keynotes for powering Unique You today, Eric.
I love it.
But, powering is all about your energy. And we all have a certain limit of the energy that we have. And what you started is really be aware of your energy. You wake up in the morning, you feel, you got your energy extension, but if you're going to go and waste it right and left and, not being mindful in how you do it and not recharge it, you're going to burn out very quickly. It's like you don't run your energy, you don't run your car on fumes for, on the highway, right? You're thinking about how you're running. So you have to be mindful where your energy flows, where is it coming, how do you recharge, and now how do you give it? And I tell you, this was very good example because I found myself in this let me meet as many people as I can, fatigue, or race. I said, I want to meet as many people as I can. And I start booking the meetings right and left. And I found myself being exhausted. And we talk about this Zoom fatigue, right? people that are in the corporate world, they have meetings they're required to attend. And then on top of it, add a networking with professionals outside of your circle. It can deplete your energy. So I love that you've pointed out being mindful about it and knowing your parameters. That is maybe one phone call a week that you need to connect with a new person, maybe two people, maybe attend a small event for 30 minutes. And then giving different tips on how you can also build relationship beyond just having a conversation face-to-face is through the chat, and also using the power of LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is a phenomenal platform. I love the platform. I love the professional opportunities that you can build on this platform. And as you mentioned, Erich, it is being mindful. How do you approach, how do you build relationship? It's not just push the button. It's coming with, again, how can I add value? How can we connect? How can we collaborate on things further?
And it's one person at a time.
Yeah.
If it's in person, and say you're not exhausted by it, but you come home with 50 business cards, where do you even begin? If it's a Zoom event and you've promised 50 people, that you'll connect with them, those are numbers at that point that just aren't realistic.
It's not realistic.
Where do you start, and how do you build meaningful relationships with 50 people at a time? You build meaningful relationships one person at a time. Over the course of your week, it could turn into 50 potentially. But my focus needs to be on you and where we're going and what's going to happen with our relationship. The other 49 people, they can wait.
That is true. And that is true. And I think that sometimes we are in this age where a lot of people are focusing on likes. A lot of people are focusing on following. A lot of people are focusing on quantity. It's like all about quantity, quantity, quantity. But then if you focus on quantity, your quality is going to suffer. And the quality of relationship is that's what the most important. That's what is going to move forward and enrich the circle of people you're surrounding with yourself, and bring you opportunities as well. And Erich, I love the conversation today, and we named it "How to Enjoy Networking." Actually, enjoy networking, right? You've given us some great tips, and maybe as we close out, give us some of the things that people can walk away and say, okay, I've learned all of these details. These are the things I can implement, but how can I actually enjoy networking?
Yeah. So I would say first and foremost, do it for your own reasons. We talked about that earlier. Identify what your reasons for networking is, how you would define it. And honestly, and I do a bit of coaching and career coaching myself too, but defining before you even start the thing, what would this need to look like for me to enjoy it? So before you even turn on Zoom, before you turn on your computer, sit and consider what needs to happen over the course of the next half hour or more for me to consider this an enjoyable, fruitful experience. Because otherwise we end up prioritizing the urgent over the important, like Stephen Covey used to say. We turn it on, and then people are asking us questions, and they're, the expectations are being mounted on what we're supposed to do. And we completely lost sight of the fact that, wait a minute, I came in here wanting to get a very particular thing out of it or have it go in a particular way. And now I'm being pulled in a different direction. It's easier to be pulled in a different direction if you don't first come in clear on what it is you want the experience to be. So identify and define for yourself very clearly, write it down if you need to before an event, what needs to happen during this event for this to be an enjoyable, fruitful experience. What am I looking for? If it's a single conversation that turns into something, maybe a next step is a virtual coffee, or hey, let's connect over the phone, or learn more about one another, then that's fine. If it's my goal was to meet and talk to these 5 people or these 10 people, then that's your goal. I can't tell you what it should be. You can define that for yourself. And then 2, I think really just keep perspective on what networking is. If you fall back to, you default to how we've always seen it, which is this network of wires, I guess, just to come back to the image that you pointed out, void of any really truly meaningful connection, that's what it's going to be for you. And it doesn't need to be that way. You can shift the narrative. You can literally, in the moment, if you're tired of getting scripted responses, Stop asking a scripted question. What do you do is the most scripted question that you can ask. And then people will just respond with something that they have scripted themselves. If you want a meaningful connection, start with something different. Ask people why they do what they do. Ask a question that people are not going to expect. It'll make the conversation more fun for you, more fun for them. And honestly, we'll probably go in a direction that's so much more fruitful and enjoyable
Yes.
than if you show up in a very scripted way and ask the scripted questions that are going to get the scripted responses. This is our opportunity to change our perspective on what we're doing and consider how we can do it a little bit differently so that professional networking can be both fruitful and enjoyable.
I love this. I love that. And add a little bit of curiosity to that. Be curious about other people. One of the examples to the questions that you mentioned, the questions we had a lunch with a gentleman that was back about a couple of years ago. We had a lunch over a team that was invited. We were invited together, and the gentleman started asking everybody at the table a simple question: what is the meaning of your name, and how did you get named? And we had such an amazing stories coming out of that. And then the second question, simple question, but the second question he asked, he said, what are you the most grateful for today? What are you the most grateful for today? And people start thinking, they're like, you get to have a little bit more of deeper responses when you start. And it showed that the person is curious. You're curious to know a little bit more about everybody in the room. And then it created this interesting and more personal flow of a conversation where it prompted people to open up and even soften up. Sometimes we're too scripted, like you said. Our demeanor is like, oh, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to open myself to you. But when you come and you open up and you lean toward, the people and you want to learn about them curiously, genuinely, it can open up beautiful conversations, meaningful, deep conversations that will lead to deep relationships. Wonderful tips. Thank you so much, Erich. And I would love for you to tell our viewers and listeners, how can they find you, and also some of the things that you would like to share with our audience today?
Thank you, Jana. I appreciate it. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. My company is called Harmony Insights. As you mentioned in the introduction, I help organizations and consultants leverage the DISC personality assessment to help their teams and their clients really understand themselves and understand other people, and then build those meaningful, productive relationships with one another as they go. So that's all at harmonyinsights.com. And I'm also the founder of the HR Hot Seat Mastermind community, where we welcome HR professionals, those who serve HR professionals, wherever you may happen to be, to our monthly mastermind style conversations. They're entirely free. These days, they're entirely virtual, and we come together to support one another, to tackle common challenges, to learn about new resources, to tell jokes, whatever we need to be inspired to do the vitally important work of human resources. And that's all at hrhotseat.com. I've also put together, because I talk so often about networking like an introvert, or just effective networking tips for any personality style. If your viewers go to harmonyinsights.com/network like an introvert, harmonyinsights.com/network like an introvert, you'll see some of the resources that we mentioned today, maybe some things that I didn't bring up, but just additional books and resources to help you learn more about what it means to network effectively, regardless of your personality style.
I love this. Thank you so much for giving us these resources. If you are not connected with Erich, find him on LinkedIn, send him a request, send him a meaningful connection request, and something about what we've talked about today.
Personalize your request.
Personalize your request. Tell him you showed him on the Empowering Unique You show. And also share this episode with your community. Maybe a tip or two or thing that really stood out to you today from the conversation that helped you change the perspective and on the importance of building professional relationships. And share it for others to gain that valuable insights that Erich shared with us so graciously today. Well, Erich, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom, and being here with us today. I appreciate it very much.
It was my pleasure, Jana. Thank you for having me.
Wow, what a wonderful conversation. I certainly learned a lot. I certainly learned how to be more mindful in giving my energy away and structuring my purpose for conversations and what exactly I want to take away from building connections with others. I hope you have found tremendous value in this conversation as well. I believe when we start becoming curious, when we start becoming genuinely approaching people from the way of serving them and delivering value to people and building the strong relationships, we can together change this world to be a better place. Well, thank you for tuning in today, my friend, and I will see you again next week.